Okay, welcome back. Now we're going to talk about getting our side rails on and continuing on with this chassis. First thing I want to talk about is cleaning just a little bit. So we've already cleaned this once, but you always want to make sure your brass is clean as it can be. Even when you're using flux, it doesn't hurt to clean. So I use a little bit of 12,000 or 1200, 1000 grit, nothing heavy, and I just kind of lightly go over these surfaces and just make sure they're clean. Clean brass is happy brass, so I just go over these surfaces just to make sure, and it does help. So same thing here with our tubing that we're going to install. So I've already done this, but again, just taking some sandpaper and cleaning, getting them as clean as possible, really helps with the solder flow. So once you've cleaned it, now we can get it pinned out here on the board. So we're using our 5/32 square tubing as we talked about before, but if you'll notice here on my board, you'll see some lines here, and this just helps me align this tubing to make sure it's right. And on your soldering board you can draw lines, and I just count the holes from each side, make sure everything's even. You don't have to do that, but it just helps. So now I can just sit here and I can place these in here, and we can put some pins down and get it secured exactly where we want it to be. Okay, so now I have it pinned out. As you can see, I use the larger diameter regular pins with the brad nails, because sometimes that makes a difference. But got it all lined up. I put a couple of the pins back here as my stopping point to keep it flush with the back of the bracket. Pretty simple. Should be laying nice and flat. If you feel that you have to have a little bit of weight, just to make sure, you could put a flat file or any weight over the top of that. And now we can get some solder flow right here. Okay, now it's time to solder these rails back here to the bracket. Again, I'm just using some Stay Clean Flux, liquid flux, and I'm going to use a disposable brush, and I'll drip it in there. I'm not shy about it. Get it in there, do both sides. Yep, looking good there, not a problem. Remember, I'm using 60/40 solder. So let's get the iron out, see what kind of trouble we can get into. And I'm just going to add a little bit. You don't need a lot, just a little bit of solder right there on the tip, just like that, and it is ready. And you hear that sizzle, and you just hold it for a few seconds, and you can see the solder flow all the way down the tube. And that is it. It is on there. Now we'll do the other side. Okay, so we're finished with those rails, and now it's time to move on. We're going to get the front axle set at the right wheelbase. As you can see, I like to use the model kit, and I just go by sight and align it to where it's centered, inside the wheel wells. 99.9% of the time that works just fine. Some people, you can take your caliper, you can measure it. I just find it a little bit easier to do it this way, but you can do it any way you want. So I put the body on there like that, and now you can see what we're going to do. We're going to put our our rails here on each side, but we're going to start with the two outside ones first. We'll get right to that, but what I want to tell you is we discussed this already, that the difference in the thickness of these pins, okay, you notice how they're tapered, the thickness of these pins, and then of course the brad nails, they're a little bit thinner. Sometimes you wouldn't believe it, sometimes when you're pinning this out, that the thickness there, just moving it a little bit, will get your your wheelbase lined up just perfectly. So that's why I use both the pins and the nails. So now you can see here, and then I'll turn it like this. We also want to make sure that it is in proper alignment. Again, this is why these little lines that I draw here that I showed you earlier on come into play. You can get these set absolutely about as perfect as it gets. Okay, so you can now you can take either a nail or the screw, but usually on this one the nail will work, like right here, and then you're going to make sure it doesn't move around from side to side. So now we'll move on to installing the rails.